Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about the 14.10 mid-season patch from the perspective of support. There are going to be some big changes here. I recently came back from EU West. I'm back home in New Zealand now, so please forgive the audio and the lighting quality. I just wanted to get this done as quickly as possible before the patch goes live. Okay, let's start with the boots changes. So they had quite a few more changes lined up, which they ended up reverting. The changes that actually remained. So plated steel caps, these are 100 gold cheaper. This is a big deal for support because we struggle to get gold in the first place. So this is going to allow us to actually complete these items on a lot more bases. Normally, if we don't have 800 gold from our tier 1 boots to upgrade it to the plated steel caps here, we are just going to decide to go for Boots of Lucidity or Boots of Swiftness for 600 gold, or awkwardly sit on a cloth armor until the next base when we can get tier 2 boots. But getting your tier 2 boots as fast as possible is a huge deal, so this is a big buff to steel caps. And not only that, but it gets more armor. It gets 5 more armor early on, which is going to be significant. While the basic attack reduction does get reduced, this is going to come more online in later stages of the game. And now this also means that this item is going to be better in general against AD, not just against auto-attacking champions. I would expect engagers and playmakers to be considering this item a lot more now. Boots of Mobility, so these have been removed from the game. Good riddance, these boots were practically never built by any champion in any role, except for the occasional Pike and Thresh, and they would even prefer Boots of Lucidity for the most part. They are being somewhat replaced by Symbiotic Souls. The problem with Symbiotic Souls is that it doesn't really come online until you have traveled 150,000 units. So first of all, you have to buy these tier 2 boots with 900 gold, and then you have to travel a certain number of units until it becomes upgraded. When it's upgraded, it gives you more move speed and way more move speed out of combat, which are big deals, but it's going to be too late in the game to warrant buying these boots for a lot of the time. Normally, you're going to get your tier 2 boots if you're rushing it at around 6-7 minutes, depending how the game is going. And then roughly 8 to 10 minutes after you have those boots, if you're moving relatively consistently, you'll get the upgrade over here. So by the time you have all of the mobility you want, all of the plates are gone. It's practically the late game already. And the most crucial time in that early to mid game when we want to be generating win conditions, we don't have the mobility that we want. So in high elo, I don't think these boots are going to be performing very well. In mid elo, it'll be average. And then in low elo, when games go long enough for you to get as much value as you can out of these boots, then it's probably going to be a little bit stronger. But ever since Riot reverted the changes to Boots of Swiftness, I think Boots of Swiftness are going to be stronger in a lot of situations than these shoes here. Empowered Recall is cool. It's going to be a fun little tool to play around with. You can potentially roam up towards Void Grubs and Herald and top lane, and then get a faster base to go back towards your ADC to prevent whatever they want to be doing on the bottom side of the map. We can also be a bit creative and run into a bush and then immediately recall and achieve quite a lot of fake pressure when they think you might still be hanging around. But otherwise, I would be surprised if these boots become a staple in the meta. I think they're probably going to be getting some number buffs from Riot. And all in all, I don't think that there are going to be too many changes to what we are doing with boots, except for prioritizing plated steel caps a little bit more. Okay, so for the enchanter items, Dawn Core has gotten quite a bit of a change here. So I think that this item desperately needed a change. I think they had the right idea, but I think the execution was pretty horrible. So the problem with the changed Dawn Core now, what they did is they added a bunch of heal and shield power, and they removed the summoner spell haste and the ability haste. Those are the main changes that stick out to me. We're getting a little bit more AP, so enchanters, they mainly want as much ability haste and heal and shield power to get effectiveness, not necessarily AP. It's not irrelevant though, and less mana regeneration. That is going to be quite relevant because as an enchanter you want an extended fight, and getting as many spells as possible is going to be useful for that. Now unfortunately they removed the 20 ability haste. So this is one of the biggest reasons that you would want to build this item, because it was such an effective stat stick. But you don't get the summoner spell haste, you don't get the ability haste, Sure, you get some nice heal and shield power, but this is only going to really come online much later on in your build. And keep in mind that it is a relatively expensive item. 2700 gold is probably one of, if not the most expensive enchanter item in the game. So I think that they really failed with their vision on this item. I think there's practically no reason to go this earlier than, 4th, 5th, 6th item when we can be building Moonstone and Redemption and items like that instead. And typically supports are going to only get to buy, 2 to 3 legendary items before the game is over. But on champions that are going to be abusing it really well, if we think about, Sona, maybe Soraka, maybe Milio, maybe you can build it a little bit faster on those champions and still see some value. But remember that this item gives you no, unique passive or active component like Ardent Sensor or Redemption or Moonstone gives. Now for Echoes of Helia, I'm a bit disappointed to see this item remain in the game. It was really clunky, it's a bit counterintuitive. I'm not sure why this item exists, I'm not sure what vision they have for it, I don't know what its identity is. You kind of do a little bit of damage and you heal someone after you do some damage and you heal an ally. But anyway, the max stacks you're going to have is 2, but it doesn't matter because the damage is going to be significantly increased per stack, and the heal is going to be really significantly increased. This is a gigantic change here. So they're really trying to brute force this item into Enchanter's builds for whatever reason. But, these numbers are a significant change. It's probably going to be overtuned for champions who can use this item well. The first champions that come to mind, Sona and Milio, and then maybe we can include Soraka, Nami, maybe even Bard. The other thing about this item is that it spikes quite early. It doesn't give us much, percentage scaling of anything, so these flat numbers are going to be good in mid to high elo especially. Shurelya's Battle Song is getting nerfed. This is a very reasonable decision from Riot. This item was just overperforming in places that it shouldn't be. It was being built as an item for mid lane mages, and then you know that you've kind of messed up with an item. It was also, of course, being built as an item for mage supports. Mage supports that didn't want to go the Ryleys into Liandry's build path. If you think about champions like Xerath or Vel'Koz or Lux, what they would do is they would build Shurelya's Battle Song as a first item instead of Luden's Companion, because Luden's was heavily underperforming. So now this item has gotten nerfed. This is either going to be a significant nerf to the mage supports that don't have an alternative, or mage supports are going to have an alternative. We'll have to see later on in the patch notes here. Of course, mage supports aren't the only champions that are building this item, so for other enchanters, this is going to be a little bit painful, especially on Janna, who really needs as many move speed stats as possible. But I think it should still be a reasonable decision for enchanters to be building. Moving on to tank items, so Anathemas is removed. Good riddance, no one built this item, it was too niche, it didn't really make a lot of sense. We would much rather build items like Zeke's, Convergence, or Knight's Vow. Let's move on to Warmogs, and so it might be a little bit surprising that I want to talk about Warmogs for support, but this item was seeing a lot of popularity on Support Zillion, and what myself and my students in School of Support did was theorycraft how we could use this item on other champions as well, such as Bard or Renata, or even Soraka. And the reason that this item was seeing some popularity with these types of champions is because it gives move speed. This is always a fantastic stat for any support who can incorporate it into their build. But when you reach the bonus health threshold for Warmogs, not only do you get that regeneration to keep you full health and allow you to stay active and pressuring on the map almost permanently, you also get 10% bonus movement speed on top of that, and so you're staying on the map, you're moving around very fast, you can fight, you can peel. It's just a very oppressive item when you can unlock the unique passive. And so for champions that didn't have a great first item option, or if you wanted to be incredibly greedy because this is an expensive item, when you have this item with the threshold unlocked, it is broken. So now what Riot are doing is they are trying to make Warmogs more appealing for just general tanks and giving it a straight buff. 250 extra health. That is a huge deal. And not only is it a lot of extra health, it helps supports reach this threshold much faster. What we had to do was build double scaling health in the rune shards and Warmogs and the ruby crystal on top of that. But now we can just build Warmogs with the scaling rune health shards and immediately unlock the passive, which is going to be a big deal. This is going to be one of the first items I'm going to be testing out on the aforementioned champions. Although it is a greedy option in high elo, sometimes you don't get up to 3100 gold and buy this item before the game is over, so keep that in mind. Abyssal Mask, so I'm very happy to see some buffs to Abyssal Mask. This should be the go-to magic resist support item. Unfortunately, it wasn't performing nearly as well as Kaenic Rukin, which was more expensive but made you much more tanky. What they're doing with it is they're reducing its cost by 100 gold, very nice. A little bit less magic resist, okay, whatever. But the main buffs here are going to be coming from the percentage magic resist shred instead of the flat magic resist shred, and a bigger radius. So when you want to be building this item to get value out of its magic resist shred, you want AP allies. And so if you have AP allies, the enemies are going to be building magic resist, and then the percentage shred is going to be much more effective than the flat shred. Of course, the radius being larger is always going to be a buff. It is a situational item, and when that situation is happening, it should be built, which is what's probably going to happen now. Moving on to Knight's Vow, so I'm very surprised to not see a significant nerf to this item. Whenever other roles start to build support items, that's when you know that the item is probably overtuned. This item was being built in jungle, and sometimes even in top lane, and this is barely even a nerf. So it has a little bit less armor, but it has extra health regen, so that, you know, somewhat cancels each other out. The armor is going to be a little bit more valuable. And now the damage redirection is going to be increased when your target is healthy and decreased when your target is unhealthy. So overall, it's probably going to be a slight nerf, but this should have been probably touched harder. And the redirected damage is also going to be reduced by your resistances. I never really felt the damage redirect, you know, chunking out my health too much, but I suppose that's nice as well. So this item is still going to be strong. Moving on to Zeke's Convergence. Now this is one of my favorite changes that Riot made. It had very unintuitive stats. It had tanky stats, but then it also had mana. And mana is probably one of, if not the worst stat for engagers and melee supports to have. Because typically what you want to do is get your cooldowns out, and then, you know, the fight is done. You're not hanging around for ages, getting multiple rotations and running out of mana. So now we're going to be getting more health from Zeke's. We're going to be getting a little bit less armor, but 25 magic resist up from 0. That's going to be a big deal. Unfortunately, the ability haste is definitely going to hurt, but overall, I think this is a buff for Zeke's, and it's just a good decision for the item's identity. Also, whenever support items have magic resist, it's worth paying attention to, because that stat is so difficult for supports to come by normally. With Zeke's Convergence, with Locket, with Mercury Treads, we're going to have a pretty significant amount of magic resists if we need to. Okay, moving on to mage items. We're just going to briefly touch on this for items that are going to be relevant for mage supports. This Blackfire Torch item, this is going to be kind of a Liandry's but with mana and ability haste. So it was a bit weird that champions like Zyra and Brand, although the Ryleys and the Liandry's build was very effective, the way that it was effective was it just stat dumped a bunch of HP into them and said, you can't one-shot us, we're going to get a lot of damage out. It didn't give any ability haste, it didn't give any mana. So I think this makes sense of a change. And now you get to build an item that is strong for Zyra and for Brand and have ability haste and mana. Now this item doesn't have any percentage HP scaling, so I'm not sure if it's going to be performing better than the Ryleys and the Liandry's, because those are still going to be in the game, but it's something definitely worth playing around with. It's also worth noting that this is 200 gold cheaper than the Liandry's, so that makes it much more appealing. Moving on to Luden's Companion. So this item was just heavily underperforming. It should have been the go-to mage item for mage supports, but it didn't have good numbers. It was too expensive, and so they desperately needed to buff this item, which I'm glad they did. We're just going to have to see if it's enough. So what they did is they made it have a 12-second cooldown to always fire out 6 shots. So kind of like what old Liandry's were in other seasons. A significant base damage for the shots, and repeated damage from different shots onto the same target is increased. So this is the right idea, but hopefully this is going to be the go-to item now for champions like Xerath, like Lux, like Vel'Koz. Some summoner spell changes here are going to be relevant because Ghost and Cleanse got their cooldown increased. So that means that ADCs are going to be less likely to want to take these. Exhaust got its cooldown increased. So this is going to be somewhat relevant. If we're playing Enchanters and we're choosing between Exhaust and Heal, this is going to put a slightly stronger argument on Heal. The only issue is if you have heal, your roams aren't going to be very impactful, and then you're really just tunneling in on the peeling identity. But talking about heal, it has been buffed to have a slightly longer range, and barrier has been buffed as well. So what's probably going to happen is ADCs are going to start taking heal with, playmakers and engagers as a support, or they're going to be taking barrier with enchanters as a support, which would then probably take heal. Ghost was starting to become really prominent in the bot lane, but I think the main reason for this, you would see it on champions that took lethal tempo. And if they have removed lethal tempo, which we will see a little bit later in the notes as well, then there's less incentive to extend the fight for as long as possible with Ghost. But also the numbers are significant. Moving on to the rune changes, so Predator is removed. No one built that anyway. Ingenious Hunter, so I'm a little bit sad about this. It's not going to be the end of the world. I was starting to play around with some builds with, Locket, Redemption, and Sweeper being reduced by Ingenious Hunter. But that's fine. This was seeing very few uses anyway. And Relentless Hunter, this is going to be a big change. So there is no longer any bonus to having this rune at the start of the game before you get any stacks. Now what was happening with Relentless Hunter was that a lot of supports were just indexing into the domination tree secondary to get Relentless Hunter for lack of alternatives or for the strength of having move speed as a support. You would see champions like Renata and Nami, who should theoretically not want to index into the domination tree, go Relentless Hunter. Now I think since Relentless Hunter is significantly nerfed, it's probably going to go back towards common inspiration runes as a secondary option instead. As we said, lethal tempo has been removed, and press the attack. This is going to be kind of the new extended fight rune. I think it's just going to be a little bit weaker than the old lethal tempo for extended fights. Legend Tenacity has been removed. Legend Haste has been added. Supports don't get to last hit minions anyway, so we're not really going to be playing around with this too much. Font of Life has been significantly nerfed in my opinion. This was one of the strongest support runes in the game, and I think it's reasonable that they nerfed it, but it is a huge nerf. So what happened is that if you CC'd enemies, any allied auto attacks would heal them, and it had no cooldown on that as long as they were CC'd. Now there is a 20-second cooldown, and it's not on your allies' auto attacks, it's just when you CC someone. I think the numbers are pretty small here, so you get a 10 up towards a 50 health heal, nerfed for ranged users at a 20-second cooldown. I think they're probably going to have to buff this rune if I'm not mistaken, but I'll probably be going Resolve Secondary a little bit less. Okay, so the Inspiration rune tree is seeing some changes. Futures Market is gone, not a big deal. Cashback, this is going to be better the more legendary items you purchase. It gives you a slight refund on them. Supports don't have enough gold to get as much value as you would want out of this rune. The other thing to keep in mind is that Cashback is on row 1, where you're competing with Magical Footwear and Hex Slash, which are both quite powerful runes in their own rights for support. Minion Dematerializer is gone, that's fine. And unfortunately, the same is going to be for Jack of All Trades. This looks like a fun rune to play around with, but it's in row 3. It is going to be competing with Cosmic Insight, which is one of the most staple inspiration runes of all time for support. So I don't think we are going to be using this too much. It also incentivizes more gold and items to get value out of this because you want unique stats, right? And to have unique stats, you need a bunch of unique items, and we're support with no gold. So unfortunately, we're not going to see changes for the inspiration tree. The last change I'm going to be talking about is the experience change. So for Dio experience, it's going up by 8%. Of course, this is just going to be a buff to support comparatively to the rest of the roles all round, and of course ADC. But it's also going to give more value to those who don't leave lane. Enchanters and mages who struggle to roam around, they get rewarded more by just staying in lane and soaking up as much experience as possible. I'm not a fan of this change too much. I don't like incentivizing supports to just stay bot lane the whole time and not leave lane as much. I think they've been doing this consecutively with some of their systematic changes. But the only other thing to keep in mind is that these EXP buffs might change when we hit certain level thresholds. I doubt it's going to change which minion we hit level 2 on, but it might change which minion we hit level 3 on, so let's keep that in mind. Otherwise, I think overall Enchanters probably got the most strength from this patch, with the summoner spells, with the supports that can potentially abuse Echoes of Helia, with the XP changes. However, I don't want you guys to be disheartened if you don't play Enchanters. We have been here plenty of times where a patch is pushing one class, and the changes in the buffs are just over exaggerated. So keep playing your favorite champs. It's more than likely going to be completely fine with whatever champions you are currently playing. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you think I may have missed anything. Thank you for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, as this really does help my channel grow. To level up your gameplay and mentality, visit my website schoolofsupport.gg. The link is going to be down in the description below.